Once again, I love those resounding applauses. I know that none of those applauses are for me. They're actually for the guests that we're going to introduce you to in a little while. However, in the meantime, between time, those who do not know me, you will know me now. I am Roland Bubba Grimes, the host, producer, and chief cook and bottle washer for the Roland Grimes, not just entertainment, not just sports, an entertainment show with shooting live here at Everlasting Restaurant, the Hosperant in Capitol Heights, Maryland, 9185 Central Avenue, under the authority of Dr. Baruch, one of my classmates at the world-famous Bishop McNamara High School. For those of you who don't know me, let me fill you in very quickly. I am a dual master's degreed individual in the School of Education at Syracuse University. I played football, 3-year letterman for Syracuse University, and was also named by the football team as outstanding student, citizen, and athlete, which means that sometimes I did my schoolwork, sometimes I treated people well, and occasionally here and there I threw a block for one of my teammates, and I got recognized for it, so it's a beautiful thing. I want you youngsters out there who are watching the show to remember everything you hear, so take out a pen and piece of paper and make sure you write everything down. I want you parents out there who are watching, you're going to get some very, very astute information from our guests in the music industry, the financial industry. You're going to meet a gentleman by the name of Mr. Paul Holland. You're going to meet a young lady by the name of Miss Shawn Allen. You're going to meet the legendary Intruders. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and Google them and YouTube them right now. The Intruders are going to be here on the set of the Rolling Grimes Not Just Sports and Entertainment Show. Sit tight, get ready. The mothership's about to take off, and when we land, it's going to be another one of those funky things. Rolling Grimes Not Just Sports and Entertainment Show. We'll be back with you in a few moments. Thank you. Welcome back. I love that. Welcome back to the Rolling Grimes Not Just Sports and Entertainment Show, shooting here live at the Everlasting Life Restaurant every Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. I was actually entertaining the crowd before the camera cut on, and I was singing some Barry White, some Luther, and some other stuff, and they absolutely booed me. So I think this will be my last show ever. It's been wonderful. In the meantime, I want to introduce you to the person who is now going to take over the show. He's now Junior Bubba Grimes. Ladies and gentlemen, do me a favor, put your hands together for my co-host, Mr. Mark the Speaker Man Wiggins.
Thank you, Roland. It's a pleasure to be here.
Mark, it's always a pleasure to be with you. Do me a favor real quick.
I'm not singing, no.
God, I blew it. Right on cue. Look, quick question, man.
Yes, sir.
What does the Speaker Man mean? Tell us, Mark the Speaker Man Wiggins.
Well, the Speaker Man is really a tagline that was given to me. I was doing a presentation at a high school in DC, probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And I was talking to the crowd, and it was high school students, and I made a comment and asked for feedback from the audience. And this young lady raised her hand and said, "Mr. Speaker Man, why should we listen to you?" And I said, "Hey, that's pretty funny." And I took it.
Wow.
So it just stuck. But basically, because I speak, and I used to be the cookie man when I had a cookie store. So it just seemed to work, and it's something that people don't forget.
No, I mean, actually you don't. So what types of projects does a Speaker Man, we're going to get into this a little bit later, but tell me one of the things that the Speaker Man is doing right now that we should be on alert for.
Well, what you should be on alert for is I'm doing some online coaching. And we're doing a session on my book, Journey to Success, and it's going to be like an 8-week course where you get on in group coaching, and we're going to go through the product and go through the training, and hopefully at the end of the training you will have your own personal strategic success plan, which is what we talk about in Journey to Success.
You know, and I'll be honest with you, man, ever since I got involved with you, my game has actually gotten better. You know, and I have had some positive influence from people like Wilbur Skipper, as you know, but I mean, things like improving on my set, working on some of my dictatorial discourse, things like that. You inspired me to poetry, and I really do appreciate it, man. So
Well, that's great, because one of the things I like to do is tell people to get off the bench. If I can move you from the bench to the starting lineup of life, then I've done my job.
Man, sounds like a coach to me. Do me a favor real quick. I have a gentleman to my right and to the audience left, and his name is Mr. Paul Holland. Mm-hmm. And you heard a little bit about his story a little bit earlier, but he has a very, very compelling journey in the business of financial services, as well as some things that he's seen and done as part of our history here in the Washington, D.C. area. Can you give me a quick highlight of some of those compelling stories you've heard?
Mr. Holland is definitely an interesting person. Just by sitting in his presence, you get the knowledge piece outside of the gray hair that he has. And he started telling stories about his industry and what the differences are between being a broker, being an agent. And then I think the most compelling part was the historical value of him starting off and being one of the first black representatives of a company. And I can't remember which company it was, because he said it was a
Metropolitan Life.
Metropolitan Life. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to say it or not. But he was one of those people who was first. And out of that first, he learned the game and learned the business, and then has mentored others to come along and do the same thing he's doing. Yes, he has one of his mentors here tonight, India Thibodeau. Is that close?
Larry.
India. I got that part right. He's one of his mentees. And I found that very fascinating. And he's been in the game pretty near 50 years.
So, well, look, ladies and gentlemen, do me a favor if you would, as I introduce the summer and present to others, my special guest, the insurance broker himself, Mr. Paul Holland. So I will tell you all how I came across him. India Thibodeau, who has co-hosted some shows with me in the past, and she and I have been collaborating in thought on a wonderful program centered around those beautiful aging baby boomers, and she has some great ideas about that. But in our conversation, she was telling me about this gentleman who has this passion for helping other people to understand how to make decisions financially that empower as opposed to decapitate them. So, having said that, I said, man, we have to have this gentleman on the show. And she says he has a reservoir of knowledge and a lot of experience. So I am very glad you were able to join us here this evening.
Thanks for inviting me.
Let me ask you this right off the break. During the time that you decided to go into the financial service industry, that wasn't an area that was overly populated by folks that looked like us. What was it, or who was it, that tapped you on your shoulder or that popped up in your mind and said, this is something I want to do?
How much time do we have?
We have about 37 seconds.
That's good. I'm gonna take all 37 seconds. I was recruited at Sears and Roebuck on Bladensburg Road.
Okay.
And I was in what they call management trainee.
Right.
And that's a code word for stock boy. You know.
Do tell.
You wear a suit, but you got to stock the shelves for the salesman. And I was making $80 a week, plus 1% of what each salesman got. Okay. So I usually take home about $120, $130 a week. Okay. Well, the Urban League, unbeknownst to me, was watching me. Okay. And they needed a black person to go to work for a major company. It was between Prudential, New York Life, and Metropolitan Life.
Because they were recruiting quote-unquote minorities.
They needed a Negro to sit beside the window.
All right, so look, I'm not gonna be diplomatic about this anymore, brother. Tell your story. They needed one of us to sit at the window.
Somebody to sit beside the window. The office was at 15th and L. So these church folk, God bless them, said you need to go work for Metropolitan Life because Metropolitan Life got more colored people than all of the black insurance companies put together.
More colored customers.
People.
Okay. Employees.
No, they ain't no employees. I said I was sitting by the window. That was it. I mean, everybody, when we would go to a meeting, everybody knew my full name. There's Paul Holland. How you know my name? Oh, we know your name. Colored person.
Like you look colored person.
Wow. So my first year was rough. I mean, racism was right there. I mean, they put it right there in front of you. I remember we were at a meeting and on the break, this guy, his name was Lawrence Stevie, a Jewish guy. He came over to me, he says, your mother living? I said, yeah. You got sisters? I said, yeah, I got 4 sisters. can I do a little housework for me? I said, if you can send your wife over to do some housework in my house.
Let's see. But
And of course, I was a bad guy. Because they had to hold me back. Because you gonna ask my mother to come over your house and do some housework? They didn't respect me. And I had a master's degree. This guy had a high school education. So you always had to be a couple steps better to compete with these guys. And then the guy that was training me was an auto mechanic. So I wasn't learning anything there. But my luck went well because there was a black lawyer who was a multi-millionaire. He owned Mayfair Mansions. He was walking down the street and he said, "Oh, you the new nigga on the block. I want you in my office every Wednesday and every Thursday and every Friday from 2 to 5. I'm gonna teach you insurance." And he had a CPA, an MBA, and of course a law degree. And that's how I became not just selling black folk, but selling people.
You know, that's a real good point. The kind of mentoring that you're doing with someone like India now, and the kind that Mark talks about with his coaching, is that a lost art now? Are we still doing as much of that, or is the teacher now obsolete, or the student just not interested?
I think they're still there. But it's up to us to go get the student and expose them to it, because a lot of them are not aware of the opportunities in it. And what he does, and what I do, and what you do.
Now, honestly speaking, did you go kicking and screaming, or you were, okay, this sounds great, I'm going to do this? Because a lot of people that we try to bring along, I mean, we have to fight them to get over themselves just to get them on this rock.
You know, I was an honor student in college. I played football too.
Okay.
And went to
Well, most honor students do play football.
okay, I'll go with that.
Well, most football players are honor students.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just, I stopped and I had a good GPA.
Well, I'm
though.
just
I
saying.
I had 2 degrees though. Y'all talking about the multiple degrees. I got
he
2.
played basketball, so we're just going to deviate from him for a second.
Okay, Mr. Holland, because you're really talking and he's not saying too much. Go ahead.
Anyway, one of the things I knew, I was not going to stay there stocking shelves.
Right.
I was coming out of there, and I had to come out of there, because if it wasn't that, it was going to be. If I would drive a cab, I was going to come out of there. I mean, I had it. You know, I had to get there early.
Okay, so you didn't have to go kicking and screaming.
No, I was going.
Because you read it.
I was going.
Now, when we return after our first break, we're going to talk a little bit about what that gentleman taught you.
Mm-hmm.
Then after that, we're going to talk about what you're teaching us.
Okay.
And then we want to wrap up and talk about what it is that, or what are some of the things that you think we need to do moving forward so that 20, 30, 40, 50, 70 years from now, we create generational opportunities instead of generational debt, generational equity, those kinds of things. Hey folks, sit tight, Roland Grounds, not just sports entertainment show. Even though I'm going to let Mark, the Speaker Man Wiggins, come back on the next set, I'm going to put a muzzle on. I'll see you guys in a few minutes. Sit tight.
One.
All right, welcome back to Rolling Around Not Just Sports Entertainment Show. Before I go any further, my good friend, Mr. Mark, the Speaker Man Wiggins, was asking a question a little bit earlier, and I want to delve and elaborate on that a little bit more. Mark, what was that question, my brother?
Thank you, Roland. It's a pleasure to be here. Paul, when we were talking before the show, I asked you what is the difference between an agent and a broker. I don't know if people know what it is. I kind of forgot what it was, but you made it very, very clear what they do. Can you explain to the audience what the difference between an agent and a broker is?
Okay. The agent is usually what we call a captive person who works for one insurance company. And most folks will say, who do you work for? Oh, I work for Metropolitan Life. And that's all they can do is sell their product. A broker is a person who works for no company. He brokers the contract for you. And he might, for instance, I get 60 checks a month. So that's how many companies I represent. Okay? So you're going to do quite well for your client and yourself if you are a broker as opposed to being an agent, because you have more exposure of products.
Okay, so the broker, you can pick products and services from different companies that are better suited for the client than just having to sell a portfolio from one company.
That's correct.
That's great. Thank you. Because it does make a difference, I think, when you are in your industry, the flexibility to go where the best offer is, the best deal is, and what's best for the client. And you get to really, really get that customer service in, as opposed to saying this is all we have and trying to fit that customer into your mold. You actually go make a mold around your customer.
That's correct.
You know, having said that though, is the preparation for either of those two positions much different?
Big difference.
Really?
You know, what I usually tell folks, go work for one company for no more than 3 years.
Okay.
Then you gotta leave. You gotta take your risk. And because if it doesn't work, you can always go back to another company.
Okay.
But I never made $100,000 and I was in the top 100 with Metropolitan Life. The day that I left, my income tripled. And I have not lost a case since I've been a broker. But when I was an agent, I would get beat all the time because somebody else would come with a product that was better than Metropolitan Life.
Gotcha.
Or Metropolitan Life didn't have the product.
That, for example, when I think in the early 80s when Universal Life hit the market, it took a bunch of insurance companies a while to begin to offer that product. They had like any legacy system, they had to make a bunch of adjustments and they had to create a portfolio. And anytime you roll out a new product, you also have to put money behind the marketing and advertising of that product. So I knew there were a lot of companies when I was in the business who just did not offer a universal life product. And therefore those who did, because it was kind of a buzz at that time, lost a lot of business competition to those companies. And these products are always evolving, they're always changing, and tax codes and different things also affect what kind of products are going to be developed as the years go by. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, in terms of moving forward, what are some of the 2 or 3 principles that you mentioned earlier about how you talk to your customer to determine how best to serve them? What are some of the 2 or 3 principles that you try to give each person, each potential client or customer? What are some 2 or 3 of the principles that you try to give them every time you sit down with them so that they at least have the foundation that they need moving forward to be financially successful in their endeavor?
The first thing I always talk to them about is premium tolerance.
Really?
Premium tolerance. What can you afford in your budget that's not a bill that you have no problem paying once a year? You can divide it up into 12 hits, but once a year. I always talk about paying your premiums once a year. And they say, I'm not going to, well, let's go twice a year. And because if you're paying it every month coming out, there's a chance for it not to be in your bank account. You forget it. But if you pay it once a year, when that, you know it's coming around, you get to notice 45 days ahead of time. Oh, well, I got to get that $3,000 together and have it ready. That's one. I got a story to tell at the end.
Okay.
The next thing I say, if you're young and you're on your way up, I can tell you what your premium tolerance is going to be. Because if you got small kids and you're buying a house, most likely we're going to go on the cheap. We're going to buy term insurance. But we're going to talk every 2 years about converting part of that term to permanent insurance, as you said. And that's the only thing I sell when I do permanent insurance is indexed universal life. Okay? And then when you're in your 30s and 40s, I'm not talking term. I'm talking universal life or a combination of universal life and term together. Reason being, I don't care who you work for, at some point you're going to change jobs. And if you change jobs, you can't take that insurance you had on your job with
Right,
you.
you can't take it with you, right?
So you always got to have your own private plan that doesn't matter where you work. And the goal when you buy life insurance is, when you get my age, you're not paying life insurance premium, but all the money that you put into the plan is in the plan plus. That's the goal. Is to say, all right, I put all this money in this policy. Now I can start taking money out of that same policy tax-free. It can be part of my retirement plan. And I want to tell you a quick story.
Please.
This guy graduated from the University of Virginia. He was drafted by the Denver Nuggets, and his mother-in-law called me and said, I want you to come to Denver for this signing, because I want this kid to know you, because I want you to do some insurance work for him. All of his agents are white. His financial planner, his agent who's negotiated his contract, and there I am, you know, sitting there.
Once again, the only one in the room.
I'm on.
You're back to the 1940s.
His parents, his godmother, his godfather, and me.
Okay.
And he said, my godmother said, we need to talk. I said, I sell insurance, man. And you need to buy some insurance. I don't want them in the mix. I want to talk to you about an insurance policy that you're going to have when you're not playing ball, that's going to give you lifetime income. Now, he got a $5 million signing bonus. I said, I don't want $5 million. I want 10% of that every year for 7 years, which was $500,000, which gave him a face amount of $25 million. And we also bought $5 million on his wife. All right, he was 22 years old. He paid that $500,000 for 7 years. That's $3.5 million, right? Well, he just turned 42. And I was at a basketball game down in Richmond. And he said, man, if I was gay, I'd kiss you. He said, you know, that's $500,000 I paid for 7 years? And I didn't pay no more premiums since. You know how much the insurance company gonna pay me tax-free every year for the rest of my life? $800,000 a year. I said, my, I'm gonna kiss you.
Well, Paul, let me ask you a question. You're trying to explain the strategy, is what you're talking about. Why is it so difficult for people to hear what you're saying? It makes perfect sense. You do the math, it makes sense. But why is it so hard for us to wrap our mind around that type of investment?
Well, you know, I hate to say it, black folk have a different mindset than my white clients. My white clients, 90% of them will pay annually, one. Black folk want to pay monthly. And the male will say, shoot, she can get a job. She don't need all that money. So once you get his mindset changed from that, once you get his mindset changed from that, don't laugh.
I never said that. I never said
Once you
that.
get his mind changed to that and make him understand that it's not a bill. It's another form of savings, but if you die too soon, we got your family covered. That's how we get them going. I just buried one of your frat brothers signed it. I just did a major policy on him in December, and he got preferred. But he had a very nice repass.
Sure did. Wow.
Okay.
I'm going.
Did I ask you a question?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
So I'm going to close up this portion of it, open it up for questions and comments. Before I do, let's go back to something you were saying a second ago about the difference in the mentality between African Americans and some of your Caucasian clients. On this show, for those of you who have been following us over the last 2 years, you know that we often get into conversations about the mentality of different cultures and how we get there. I will give you an example. One of the things that's happening now is the Roland Not Just Sports Entertainment Show. And we have opportunities for people to advertise on our show. Commercials. Mark, you're familiar with it, where we have the website. And people look at it and say, well, you don't have a lot of viewers. You don't have, when you get bigger, come see me. And the difference between that and my Caucasian customers is that they say, oh, I want to buy this stock while it's low. And then when the value of it goes up, there's a chance that he's going to, one, remember me, but two, all of the people that come on board new and pick up his show, they see me right now before the field is crowded. So they come in, they buy low, and then they sell high. Or they come in when things aren't, when we say new, they're like on it. When you say new to black folks, they're like, well, let me wait for it to get old, and then I'm going to show up. And by that time, the train is gone.
You got to be a risk taker, especially when you're young. You got to be a risk taker, because if you make a mistake, you can always correct it. So while you have time, take a risk. Yeah.
Well, even with that, the part about the difference in the mentality that you mentioned in terms of the brother who says, well, she's going to get a job, so when I die, she can still eat. And the other guy who says, look, I want to take care of my family. Before we close on this section, what are some of the reasons you believe that that mindset is so much different between the two?
Well, because they haven't been exposed to the financial reality of when their parents died, it was maybe $5,000. So, you know,
So we haven't benefited from that. Okay.
For a long time, our parents, I know our great grandparents, if they had $1,000 of life insurance, it was great. So they're being exposed to big numbers, which is not really big numbers. When you say, because I rarely saw anybody less than 100,000. It might be a child, but if you came to me and said, we start at 100, and we go up. And one of the things, how you figure out what you need is, you said, final expenses. Whether it take my spouse to be debt-free. Emergency fund, especially if you have children. What's the next? Education. Make sure there's enough money for my children to go to school. Mortgage. I want my house paid off. Cover that. And lastly, you messed up and you lived too long, now we got supplementary retirement. So you got all those things in it.
Lived too long.
You know, it's funny, when I was in the business, I remember I owned about $2 million worth of life insurance, and I was in my 20s.
That's great.
And I know, right? Actually, I should use that sort of as my come on whenever I went out for a date. I say, hey, baby, you want to go out with me? I got $2 million worth of life insurance. And she'd be like, okay, so I can keep, mine. So anyway, the thing about it is, and Mark, I'm going to share this with you, and Paul, you correct me if I'm wrong, I looked at it as if when I expire, the person who is still there, if I take $1 million or they take $1 million and they put it into a trust or something of that nature,
A trust.
and use the interest and the dividends from that, then they never have to touch the principal. They can live off of that for the rest of their lives. It's $50,000, $60,000. Go ahead, talk to me.
I have a guy that I sold, he had 5 kids, and he started a business. He was working in the government, and he started a trash company. But this particular Friday morning, he got crushed between the 2 trash companies.
I'm not doing a trash company.
Don't do no trash company.
I'm out of that business.
But he had 3 girls and 2 boys. Well, the 3 girls, it went into Riggs Trust. The 3 girls ended up graduating from med school. They have a medical practice in Columbia. The boys are still knuckleheads living out there.
Gotcha.
But they can't get to the principal.
They can't, so
Cannot get to the
they
principal.
can't touch it.
Can't get to the principal until they're 60.
Wow. Amazing. Folks, do me a favor, put your hands together for this life lesson from I know there won't be a lot of questions or comments, but do me a favor, if you have something on your mind, just slip your hand and let's ask that question or make that comment real quick before we move on to our next segment. Rob.
Earlier you mentioned preferred client. What defines the person as preferred?
It's your finance and your health. You have to take the exam, and if you pass the exam, it says, hey, you're in good health, and your finance qualifies for the amount of insurance you're trying to buy, you'll get preferred rates.
Yes.
So age wouldn't be a question? Age?
No.
Question.
I got a client that just sold about a year ago at the age 92.
Wow. Really?
Mm-hmm.
I hang out with you. Your
Come
clients
on.
are living a long time.
Come on. Thank you.
Next question or comment?
If you're in the government, okay, like I'm in the government, and I'm planning on, retiring in about 5 years, in about 5 years, and I have term insurance, right? So I had started borrowing, I guess, off of my insurance policy. So they sent me a letter and told me that I need to pay back like $300 or $400, which is not a problem, but I asked the lady, if I don't pay it back, what happens? She said, well, when you die, we're gonna take that and we're gonna keep the money anyway.
Yeah, right.
I didn't understand that, but.
First off, that wasn't your government policy. Your government policy, like you said, is term. There is no cash value. So it must be a policy that you have, might be coming out of payroll deduction on your job, or you might have a policy on the side. What I would do is, first off, I would pay that loan back.
Yeah.
Because they probably charge you 8%. And that's you don't need to have a loan. If you can afford to pay it back $25 a month. You know, if it's $300 loan, get rid of that loan. But the other thing you need to have is you need to have your own personal insurance, even if you're in the government. Because here's the sad thing with folk who are in the government. When they come out of the government, the face amount goes down, and the premiums go up every 5 years. But you're not building up any cash value. So while you're still in good health, while you still got the income to afford it, buy a permanent plan of life insurance so that you don't care what your government policy does when you retire. You're welcome.
Now, your philosophy on, you know, I'm not going to get into the companies, and that's, you kind of mentioned it earlier, but obviously you have a perspective by term investor difference. Let's talk about it. What are the advantages and disadvantages from your standpoint?
I see no advantage in buying term and investor difference. Because on term insurance, you're renting. All you're doing is putting money into a plan where you get nothing. I would rather you buy a universal life, pay the minimum premium. That means you buy a term policy, it's 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, or 30 years. And at the end of that time, I have a client who's a lawyer, because lawyers know everything, and she's had this policy for 20 years. I said, you put in $48,000 in this term policy, and you don't have nothing to show for it. Now you're 73, and now it's going to cost you. But we could have taken that same money, the same premium, and bought $500,000, and she'd be finished paying premium. So there ain't no advantage in buying term and investor difference. That's the A.L. Williams philosophy, but financial planners would never say that. That's the easy way out. Even if you have to do a combination of term, but you gotta have a permanent plan in the mix.
All right. Question?
What if you are unhealthy and you're uninsurable? So I can't pass the exam, but I want to get some life insurance to protect my family. What kind of insurance do I get? Do I qualify for?
Well, there's no such thing as uninsurable. There's a face amount that you can only get. And I would just go to 3 different companies and their max is $50,000 each, so I can get you $150,000. I'm gonna get you insured, okay? It costs a little more because nobody will insure you, but it's guaranteed I'll get you insurance.
Sir?
What's the difference between the whole life policy and the university policy?
Okay. Whole life is a dinosaur. Long ago, it was a great policy. It's still not bad for some people.
Not much to sell it to.
Yeah, I did too.
Get some Tyrannosaurus Rex.
I did too. But you know, with a whole life policy, you have a set premium, a set face amount, and you can only borrow on a whole life. On a universal life, you have flexible premiums, you have a minimum premium, you have a target premium, and you have a maximum premium that you can put in. And you can also say, hey, I want to do a 7-pay, I want to do a single pay. You got all kinds of things you can do with a universal life. And after a certain period of time, instead of borrowing, you can have what we call withdrawal rights, where you withdraw the money, and you ain't got to put it back. Okay?
That's awesome. All right, folks, do me a favor once again, give a hand. He'll be around for a little while in his car. Let's keep the party going. Paul, appreciate you greatly. All right, folks, make sure you get his car. We're going to take a 5-minute break for him to grab something to eat real quick. There's some water in the back. Get a chance to take some pictures with Paul.